Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to set up a LiquidPixel grid on the front of a leotard, and this can be applied to pretty much anything you're going to be doing. Um, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is open up in Photoshop the base image we're working on. So this is the front of a leotard, and hopefully it will open here in a bit. Okay, so this is the front of the leotard that we've set up. Um, for this purpose, it's just a basic image. I haven't done anything else to it, just to kind of show you how to set up the initial grid. So we need three things in order to set up a grid. We need a base image, we need a selection of the area that we're going to actually be applying the grid to, and we also need a picture or an image or something in order to wrap around um, the image. So we're going to bring in a checker pattern, and you can just bring that into Photoshop, and it can be anything, a JPEG of just a checkerboard, or a grid pattern like this one, or pretty much anything you want to use. I usually push it to the top just for keep everything clean, but the first thing you need to know is that any images you bring in have to be in a rasterized format. So if you bring something in, you want to just quick click on it and click rasterize layer, so that it actually is pixels that we're working with here. So we're going to hide that for just a second, and we need to make a selection. And what we're going to be applying a grid to is this area here of the body. So we want to make a selection. Oh, I'm still in that other layer. Okay, so the easiest way I find to do it is to select the white area around these pictures and then inverse. So now you've at least just got the body. And then I'm also going to Alt click on this black area here because I don't want that, and that kind of excludes that from the selection. So now you can see I have just the body here selected. I'm also going to Alt click on this black area here. Oh, actually, yeah, that's okay if we leave that in there for right now. So, but we got the whole body selected, and then we're going to turn this grid back on, and we're going to make sure that the grid layer is actually highlighted. So we have the three things right here. We have a base image, we have a selection around that area, and we also have the grid and the grid selected. So we're going to go up to Filter and go to LiquidPixels and the Grid Authoring tool, and it will bring up the LiquidPixel window here. Okay, so it's already basically put a really basic grid in here. Sometimes things look a little funky because it remembers some of the things that's from the last project you were working on. So let's go ahead and reset everything here. The first thing you want to do is click background and click layer, and make sure it's on that base image and click check. Okay. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tell it where our selection is. So we're going to select right here over the selection. We want the interior to be loaded from our selection. So you click that, and now you can see it's changed so that it's got that selection area. And then you can start working on your grid. I find the easiest way to do it here is to completely ignore this. There's two grids here. One's on top of the other. So there's a blue grid, which we're seeing right now, and then if you turn that off, you can see that there's a red grid underneath. The red grid is actually the image, the base image that they're pulling from, and then it's going to use this blue grid to wrap itself around it. So I actually usually just turn off the red grid and make sure I have my blue grid selected and just completely ignore everything else there. So let's set up a new grid because this is kind of big. So if we click right here where it says create a new grid, we're going to do that. It's going to ask us, do we want to create the before grid, which is the red one, or the after grid, which is the blue one. But we want to make both grids so that they're actually the same size. We can go here and make it columns and rows, and this basically just gives you an idea of how much control points you want to be able to manipulate here. If we're doing something really small and simple, you may only need like a 2x2 box. If you're doing something larger and more complex, you may want a 10x10 or even higher. So I'm just going to go in somewhere in the middle here and go 7x7 and click OK. And you see it didn't do anything. So it wants you to select that area. So I'm going to kind of draw a box right around that area that we have selected and click and let it go and see it resized our grid. Now, if we would just save this out right here, basically what it's going to do is when we drop a logo or something onto this grid, it's just going to put it straight across, right across the body, just like it's kind of right on top of the image. But what we want to do is to manipulate this blue grid so that it will actually warp that image or logo so that it actually looks like it's sitting on top of the body. And you can do that by these tools right through here. Those first like 5 are really to manipulate this grid. Again, I'm going to turn off the red grid because we're not going to deal with that right now. This first is a selection, so you can actually use it and select, and now you can see that you've got points highlighted that you can manipulate here. Unfortunately, it won't let you manipulate them right without clicking on a move button or a scale button or something like that. So you have to literally grab the points and then switch to the move tool, and then it will allow you to move things around. So what I like to do is work first in columns or rows in order to get kind of the look we're going for here. So I'm just going to manipulate a few of these rows or columns. And see, I didn't switch. So that we kind of get a basic idea of what we're going for here. I think it's easier to work with using an entire row or column rather than just manipulating individual points, because it gives you a more consistent grid overall. And truthfully, we don't need a whole lot of manipulation with these, because when you put the actual image in there, if the grid is really adjusted, then the image will look distorted. So you don't want to do too awful much, just enough to kind of give it that curve. And if there's any kind of, like if you're wrapping it around a sleeve or something like that, you might need a little bit more. But I'm going to push this out just a little bit, and maybe this one as well. And then we're going to pull these back in a little for the waistline. Sometimes this tool is a little clunky, so you kind of have to just play around and do your best as much as you can. Okay, so now I'm getting down to the pieces where, like, all right, we're almost there, I think. Now, with this move tool selected, you can actually go in here and select, like it'll select the nearest one point and you can kind of manipulate it, but you have to deselect everything because I've got these points down here selected. So if you right click on this window somewhere in here, you can get this little menu and you can actually deselect everything. With everything deselected, it will allow you to manipulate your points. And I'm just trying to smooth some of this out just a little bit. Just trying to almost straighten some of these lines in the image out a little bit so they're not so harsh. Because like I said, you don't need a whole lot of manipulation here in order to get like a decent look when you put that image on. Let's pull this out so that it's at least past the selection area here. So making sure that everything's covered. Okay, this is probably pretty good right here. From here, you have a couple options. If you want, you can go ahead and save it out right here, and it'll work just probably totally fine. You can also smooth it using this box right here. I don't recommend doing that, and you may have heard in some of the other trainings not to do that. I don't recommend doing it for most of the things, but if you wanted a really like smooth grid, you can turn that on. For the most part, we don't necessarily mess with it too awful much, but you can turn it on and get a little bit more. Basically, it's going to add a whole lot of control points in here to smooth out and round off some of this. But once you have all those extra points in, it's going to be really hard to change anything. So for the most part, we just kind of leave it as is, and it gets the job done. So all we really need to do from here is to save it out. You've got 4 buttons down here. This will reset everything back to the default. This will go back to the previous grid, I believe. This one will load a grid. So if you had to edit something later on, you can actually click here and bring in a grid that you've already created. And even in the selection here, there's a load from, and you can click grid file, and actually you can load everything, including your selection,